Hey everybody out there, my name is Dragonix and this is a dev letter of Pixel RU Squared. Now I could definitely relate being a square myself, you see a little bit of self-depreciating humor there, but this game is about a pixel platformer for $9.99 with shooter and puzzle elements, but it has to deal with color theory and gravity manipulation. Now this is my dev letter series. Dev letter is basically early access games that I give my feedback to, how to improve the game, what focus should be put on certain elements of the game, and where to actually draw back in terms of, some of the focus that has been on the game in certain areas. This is not a formal review, so if you're using this as a consumer decision, realize that the game is not complete yet, but you have to make the decision based off the information that is available right now. But before I begin this dev letter, this key was obtained from the developer for the purposes of creating video content about it and critical review. They contacted me after I did a post in Game Dev. They gave me a key in exchange for some coverage. So keep that in mind. That will not affect my opinion in any way, but you guys should know that because of FTC guidelines, as well as the whole morals thing, Now let's start with the general gameplay. So you are this little pixel and you're able to do certain things in the environment. As you see there, I'm able to change gravity with those square-like things, and there are certain hazards that I'm gonna have to worry about, like that, sort of static-y screen right there. Now, the big thing about this game is, of course, its pixel art style. It's very simplistic, but in particular, the different mechanics that it has. You see in the bottom there that I'm actually making a message based on the little items that I'm getting in the game. I also have shooter mechanics. As you see here, I'm just feeding this giant green blob thing, and I'm also able to jump and rotate the environment in question, go up and down in terms of gravity. Now, that's the simple gameplay in question, and the question becomes where the game succeeds and where the game fails, because I feel like there is one strength the game has, but it's sort of overshadowed by everything else, unfortunately. The game's strength is actually in its puzzle platforming. Not its platforming nor its shooter mechanics, but it's in puzzle platforming, and in particular with the color theory element of it. As you saw there, I changed from purple to blue by going through that red portion. If you go through one of those little sort of symbols there, you will change color, and you can go through different barriers based off of that. When this element is added into the gameplay in terms of having to figure out what color you need to be in order to get through a section and how to get to that color, the game works. In particular, the game works rather well when you figure out, okay, hold on, I have to get there in a certain way so that I'm that color when I go through that. So when that does sort of execute, it does it rather well because you're having your mind sort of go through the possibilities. Now, there are certain things that I would think would make it easier. In the bottom right-hand corner there, if I'm using the bullets in terms of color, a color wheel will show. And that color wheel is very important because of the fact that opposite colors will respond differently than like colors. So if I want to shoot at something and destroy it that's, a yellow, I'm going to need its opposite color in order to deal with it. This level in particular is one of the levels that made me think, okay, this game definitely has potential. The fact of the matter is that having to go through each element of it and try to figure out what I need to do was fun. And even though there was a frustration factor, it was one of those frustration factors that worked well, where I'm sitting there going, okay, I know I can get through this. I just got to figure out what exactly the best sort of element in terms of going through these colors are. And I really do appreciate some of the puzzles and some of the levels that were put forward in this case. Now, note how I say it has potential. The thing is that I think its potential is wasted, unfortunately. Part of the reason I think it's wasted is because of all the mechanics the game has. Now, you've got shooter mechanics, you've got platforming mechanics, gravity mechanics, color mechanics. While you want to have some variety in your game, introducing these all in a short period of time frame confuses the player, in my opinion. There's just way too much going on, and especially with you don't have a lot of time to sort of absorb it with the number of levels that are currently available in this. You needing to have sort of precise control in this section here with the gravity when you really haven't been introduced to that precise platforming up to this point is problematic because it feels like you aren't ready for the next step. You're still trying to learn what was going on. There were several times in this game that I felt like I wasn't prepared for the next stage, and I went back and played the older one, and I still wasn't prepared at that point. I feel like the level progression needs a lot of work, and the levels themselves need a little bit more content in them. See, there's one theme I take out of Pixel RU Squared, and that's too much. Now, for example, here, I can change colors and shoot the elements on the other side of the room here. Okay, that's fine. Color theory is fine at this point, and trying to understand what I need to do to break these blocks is great. But then we get to this next section. I think this is where things start to fall apart, because too much is added in certain cases. Now, I have the ability to get this ricochet weapon. Now, I've been using the keyboard controls only at this point, and so I'm trying to figure out at this point, well, wait a minute, how do I destroy that yellow block, because I don't necessarily have a good way of getting through it at this point with red, green, and blue. Now, the thing is, I know that I can shoot diagonally with the weapon there, but the hint system, for example, doesn't really show me how. And considering the controls, I'm not exactly sure what's going on. I then figure out eventually that with only the keyboard controls, I can shoot diagonally if I hit the down and right arrow specifically at the same time. Now, that may sound like, okay, well, duh. But the thing is that the keyboard controls are only one set of the controls. You also have, as I'm going to show you here, keyboard mouse controls and the Xbox controller controls. Now, if I were using the keyboard and mouse, then it becomes easy. It becomes way too easy because now I can shoot 360 degrees at this point. And you see, that's the problem with options. When the keyboard option is available, you can only shoot in the 45, 90, 135 degree angles. But this level was obviously designed without that in mind, in my opinion. And that becomes a little bit of a problem because certain players are not obviously going to have a bigger challenge on their hands than others. See, when I say too much, I think it's because it's too much in certain areas while not taking the attention to the areas that you really need to pay attention to. For example, this options menu, fantastic. I can change the frame rate to 120 frames per second. Okay, cool. The contrast, I can change the full screen, window height down to the pixel. I don't understand that one because I don't see that being very effective, especially the way you implemented it, because it's by single pixels, you have to actually move it. Okay, that's fine, I guess. But having all these options is great, except for one problem, which I'm going to allude to in a little bit. Having a level editor is great, being able to build levels and, see what you can do with the levels. There's a caveat there, though. You see, the thing is that a good level editor always has a good base set of levels in order to sort of get inspiration from at this point, understand what you can do with the world. Let me show you the number of levels here. See, right now there are only 10 levels in the tutorial level from what I see, and 7 in the main set of levels here. That's way too little and doesn't give enough context for what you can do with the level editor in question, because it seems like you haven't used it to your full advantage. Again, it's great to add these options in the game, but you need the core content there, and I feel like that's where your core experience is lacking. You're not going to be able to sell this game on its pixel art style. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen because, again, there is something to say about aesthetics, and this is one of the simplest aesthetics that you can have, of course. It is just pixel art, literally pixel art. This is something I always talk about on the channel, and it's about shining a specific feature to have it sort of stand out compared to everything else. And I think that's my advice for the Pixel RU Squared developers. You've got a lot of stuff here. You got a lot of interesting elements that are playing into. I appreciate like the level names, for example, having programming terms in there and things like that. The RGB keyboard is a cool idea, but it's all stuff that should be added on top of a base game rather than sort of lacking the base game to begin with. Take one of these features and focus on it. Sort of zoom in on exactly what you want to do with the game and sort of make that feature shine before you move on to anything else. In particular, your puzzle element of your platforming. I know there's a lot of platforming out there, and I know there's a lot of puzzle platforming out there, but your color theory does feel different from everything else, and that I feel like it will stand out compared to everything else, especially if you get the level design for those other levels correct. That's the one thing that drew me to the game when I was playing it. I honestly wasn't impressed until I got to that bitmap level and then saw what the game had to offer. Up to that point, it was sort of, ho-hum. Okay, I haven't really seen anything that really draws my attention. That did. You see, part of the reason is that why you build your base code first and why you build your base design first is that when you add all these features at the start, all these like RGB features and things like that, design becomes a little bit more difficult at this point. For example, the keyboard controls that I mentioned, in that specific level where I had to, fire diagonally, it became a problem for me because, again, I was using the keyboard controls, and while you specifically made it for keyboard only, keyboard and mouse definitely had a advantage over it to the point of I had to change. And unfortunately for those gamers who get the keyboard controls and are only, all they're going to do is be frustrated. And because of the level design and the way it's developed, you almost like you forgot about that option in question. And frankly, you need more levels, you need more content. In order to show what the game has to offer, especially at a $10 price tag, you need more here. And unfortunately, at this point, I can't recommend the game because the number of levels isn't exactly there. Were they complicated levels in several cases that took a little while to go through? Yes, but unfortunately, you also have the situation where, okay, hold on, this level is really giving me a problem because unfortunately the tutorials, in my opinion, aren't necessarily well done here, that you move on to the next level just because you don't want to deal with that. You need precision where you obviously haven't had the sort of training to get the precision that you need. I can sort of point to the lack of attention on your game because of this sort of lack of focus here. Your game came out in March 6, 2015, and it's only got 11 user reviews. That is significant in terms of a sort of poor ratio between the release date and the user reviews, even though it's in early access. It's like people don't have a reason to come to your game, and I think that's the problem that you need to sort of focus on before you go anywhere else in terms of adding these extra features and things like that. Yes, of course, it's early access, you've got more to bring, but unfortunately, until you get through that element of it, it's really hard to recommend because all we're basing this is off the potential, and unfortunately for you, at least from my perspective, the potential is being squandered by the lack of focus. It's very similar to something that I'm afflicted by in terms of ADD, in terms of, so many things going on. I want to focus on all these little things. I want to add everything into the game, but then not realize that focusing on all these little things and your foundation isn't as good as what you thought it was. Now, that may sound harsh, and I don't mean it in a sort of negative connotation of, you really should stop trying or anything like that. Again, I wouldn't be looking at the game if it didn't have some sort of potential at this point, which I think it does. It's just that you need to sort of refocus your efforts, in my opinion, to really draw the game's attention, bring its strengths out. Even these simple pixel art games, even these games that don't have the visual flash, can have something if a core concept is good, and I think you have it in the color theory element. Take that color theory element, extend it to the next level. This is Dragnix signing out. I hope you got an idea of what Pixel RU Squared has to offer, and I hope the devs got a little bit of information out of this video. Again, if you want to see more content like this and haven't subscribed yet, always hit that subscribe button for more content like this. Like the video if you want, or dislike it if you want, depending on whether or not you find it useful, and I will see you all later. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you like this content and want to see more of it, you may want to hit that subscribe button on the left-hand side. If you like this video and want to see more of this content, take a look at this video on the left-hand side as well. And if you missed my last video, take a look at the right-hand side. Once again, thanks for watching, and keep on gaming.